As the world converged around me, I drew Talonthorn, ready for the ambush. Even if it were the same situation, I knew the future, and I could use that to stop Scar from getting hurt, and we could figure things out. I hoped. But when I came out through the other side, it was nothing like the dream at all. I was so relieved. I was standing amid a number of trees. The dead tree standing above me, the only thing that was the same between my nightmare and this. The sky was blue. There were normal trees around. I could have mistaken it for Earth. There was nothing particularly dark at all about the world. And I thought, all right, well, let's figure out where exactly we are. We'll find where they're keeping Scar, find where they're keeping Grant, bust them out, and we'll figure out a plan from there. But, we're just do what I can, figure things out from here. But for now, I had to figure out where in the world I was, what this world was in the first place. I made my way through the trees, and it wasn't too long before I came to a sidewalk, into a normal road, into a neighborhood. I must have been in a park of some kind. All of the houses looked almost exactly the same, and they seemed to stretch on for as far as I could see. I mean, I couldn't see above them, but the roads just went on. It must have been early morning. The sun wasn't quite up yet. I was just struck by how normal it felt. It was weird how normal it was. As I walked along, trying to get my bearings, looking around, I saw a human. Well, I saw one of the doors open and crouched for a minute, wondering if there was a place I could hide. But a man stepped out, a human. I thought, interesting. I sheathed Talonthorn and kind of tucked my shirt over it so it didn't stand out. And nonchalantly followed the guy from behind. I had no idea where he was, but if he was headed somewhere, that was somewhere, and I could figure out what was going on. Before long, we came to a market place, or like a market, and it had the word in English "market" written above, and I thought, what is going on? This is so normal. He'd gone inside, and so I followed, went in a few minutes after him, and I thought if there's English on the sign, maybe they speak English, that'd be good, because I don't have my earbuds anymore. I went up to the man at the cashier stand. It wasn't exactly like Earth, but very similar. And I went up and said, "Excuse me." He said, "Yeah, how can I help you?" He had an accent that I had never heard before. I couldn't place it, but he spoke English, and spoke it well. I said, I'm not exactly sure where I am. Everything looks the same around here. Where am I? And he said, "Oh, well," and he said a name that I didn't recognize. And I said, "Where are you from? Which district are you from?" And I said, "I'm not sure." And he said, "Well, how long have you been in the village?" "Not too long, I take it." I said, "What if I told you I just got here?" And he said, "Gotcha. That would mean you hadn't had orientation yet." "Gotcha. Well," and he started to get a little bit more excited. He said, "Well, in that case, how much do you remember from before?" I wasn't sure exactly how to take that question, but I could say that I didn't remember anything and go with that. I said, honestly, I don't really remember anything." And he whistled at that. He said, "Man, if the Prophithians gave you a full wipe, you must have done something incredible against the Empire. Oh, I'd pay to hear your story. Too bad you can't give it." I thought, what? What's going on? I said, "Yeah, so what's going on exactly? He said, well, the Profithians will give you an orientation and all of that. You should probably head back to your house before then if you can remember where that was. I wasn't sure how to respond to that. The man that had come in had bought a few groceries and came to pay for them, and I set him on the counter. The cashier started working through them. He said, I couldn't help but hear that someone's brand new. And the cashier said, yeah, he hasn't even had orientation yet, and doesn't remember a thing. And I said, wow, you don't remember a thing? That's incredible. Like, you must be awesome to have gotten a full mind wipe from the Profithians. And I imagine that I must have been in a prison of some kind, though it didn't seem much like a prison. But the man finished paying. He pulled out a couple of cards and gave them to the man, and the man gave him a card in return, and I didn't recognize anything that he was paying with, but he took the food, and he said, well, it's my day off. If you want a tour around to kind of get your bearings, I can give one to you. Orientation generally doesn't happen until a little bit later in the day. You must have woken up early from their sedatives. I said a tour would be great. He said, well, in that case, let me drop this food off at my house and I'll take you around town, show you around, and we'll get you back to where you need to be. I said, that sounds great. So he went to his house, dropped off his food, and he took me more toward the center of town. And he introduced himself as Vertin. And he had another accent that I just couldn't place, unlike anything I'd heard before. And he said, I'm sorry if I'm a little bit disbelieving that you're so brand new. Can I see your figure card? And I said, I'm not sure what that is. I felt okay feigning innocence, especially where I was innocent, if I had forgotten everything. And he pulled out a card that had a photo of him and some information, English and what I assumed must have been Profithian, on there. And he said, your figure card, if you're on the streets without it, you're in trouble. And he said, I don't have one of those. And I said, oh, that's right, you get that at orientation. Huh. He said, that makes you all the more valuable. He said, there's something I have to show you. And took me to the center of town. I felt like I could trust him, and even if I couldn't, I had a weapon, I couldn't see anything on him. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. Where were we? The figure card. That's right, he took me to the center of town. Right. And as we were walking along, I felt how to feel if I could use the Force without actually moving anything. And I could feel that presence of centeredness and focus and ability. That's just something I wasn't able to do it at home. I don't know if Darren had done something, but I knew I had the Force, and so I felt okay getting into things because I knew I could get out. And he took me to the center of town and into an unmarked building, and we went down through a very well-hidden door, and he led me down a ladder, and there were 2 guards standing in front of another door there, and he told me to wait for a minute and went and talked to the 2 guards, and they didn't seem to quite believe his story, and one of the guards came forward with some kind of device, and he scanned me over and said, hi, he doesn't have a figure card. And the 2 guards debated for a minute. He said, all right, you can take him in, but if he's traitor, if he's with the Profithians, he's not leaving. We can't let him leave. And And Verten said, yeah, let's take him in. And if he's with the Prophithians, we don't want him on the streets anyway. And they agreed with that, so they ushered me in. I wasn't with the Prophithians, so I felt safe. I just hoped it all wasn't an act. But he led me into a room, massive room that was bustling. There weren't a ton of people there. It wasn't crammed, but there were people moving all over maps and charts and plans and things. He said, welcome, G. I'd introduced myself. He said, welcome, G, to the rebellion. And I said, well, this is incredible. And he brought me around and introduced me to some of the people and explained who I was. And they did a few more checks on me to make sure I was trustworthy, that I wasn't connected to the Prophithians. And no one said anything about Talonthorn, so I wasn't too worried about that and all of that. And, you know, we talked with all these kinds of people, and some people were like, yeah, new person. Others were more skeptical, but there was this group of people in the village, like the Prophithian prison, that were mounting a rebellion, and they didn't have a lot of firepower, but they did what they could to stand up against the Prophithians, and they were gonna do great things one day. And I thought, this is the great group of people. And I tried to ask if other new people had come in recently that anybody knew. I didn't want them to know that I was looking for Scar and Grant if I was still holding to this secretiveness, that I'd forgotten everything. I still didn't blow that cover, because I felt like it might still be good to hold a few secrets just in case they weren't who they said they were. But yeah, Verten introduced me to all kinds of different people, and one of them, an archer, seemed to be kind of, not one of the leaders, but kind of higher up. Apparently he had clearance among Prophithian things that let him do things for the rebellion that other people couldn't do. And he got in an argument with Verten. He said, this guy needs a card. Like, he can't go around the streets without a card. He's going to be trapped in here. And Verten said, but if he doesn't have a card, he's invisible. The Prophithians won't be able to, track him. And if there's one person that we want, it's somebody who's been fully wiped. Maybe we can get his memories back. And Archer said, no, this is the perfect chance to slip in, get him a partial card that we can wipe the bad info from and get him extra clearances. And he'll be invisible because he'll have extra clearance among the Prophithians and be able to do more for the rebellion. And I stopped their argument and said I do kind of like the sound of getting a high clearance card. And also it'd give me a chance to kind of see what was more there. And I said I'm going to head with Archer and do this, because he had the clearance for it. And Verten didn't like the sound of that, but he said, I mean, it's up to you. You're the one who's done things against the Prophithians. And so Archer said, all right, now would be the time to do that. I don't know why Verten wanted you to be gone for orientation. That is a place to be. We should be able to get you to registration and back in time. And so he led me out to his car, which was not like a normal car. Everything else had looked pretty normal up to this point. But it was a white car, clear spherical bulb, and green lights all around the edges of it. Weird. And he got in and he started it, and it began to hover, and he led us down the road and toward one of the mountains. The village looked like it was situated kind of between two mountains. And he led us toward the one where the sun was rising up from behind. Because it had gotten to mid-morning by this point. We drove down the street and to the edge of the village where there was a white wall that stood 40 feet high, completely featureless, completely perfectly white. And except for a little window in the side. And there was a roundabout that came right up to the window, and Archer stopped there. And there was a Prophithian on the far side of the glass. I'd never seen one up close, and it was kind of disconcerting. Big head, black eyes, gray and big. And they spoke, and some translator through the window translated it into English. And they said, "What are you here for?" And I said, "Here for registration." They said, "Let us see your figure card." And he passed it on through the window, and the Prophithian inspected it for a minute, and like squinted, narrowed its eyes, and finally passed the card back to Archer, and pressed a button, and the wall opened up, revealing a road that went straight through. And Archer nodded to the Prophithian and drove us out, and he said, "Registration's in the city. It's generally the Prophithians that take you, though I've received clearances. Some people in the village have. I've been around a long time." And we drove toward the mountain, which as we got closer, and now that the sun wasn't right there, I recognized that it wasn't actually a mountain, it was a city. And as we drove into it, I saw that it was made up of buildings floating and rising to a pinnacle of a city. We drove straight into what Archer called Demias Cry. End of chapter 19.